can you believe it? We finally have our first video request, and that is what we're covering today. And that request was, how do you get started using OBS? Today we're talking about OBS, and we're covering the absolute basics that you need to get started with streaming. So if you're already streaming and using something other than OBS, you might be using Streamlabs, which is actually just an overlay and links into OBS. It will look a little bit different than this, but there is a reason that I choose to use OBS Studio, so the standalone version, as opposed to kind of the Twitch Studio or Streamlabs OBS. The main reason for that is that you can't use plugins in those other alternatives. So if you want to have cool animations flying around on your screen, have audio and visual plugins, the only way to do it is if you use this version of OBS. So it's not as user-friendly, I would say, but it is definitely the most customizable and probably the most feature-rich in the long run. So I would advise anyone who's starting out is to take the plunge and use OBS Studio. And of course, that's what we're going to be using today. OBS Studio is absolutely free to download, and I'm going to take you through all of the steps that you need to get this set up so you can start streaming. It's probably only going to take maybe 10 minutes for you to get a few bits in there, get your game loaded up, put a camera view on there if you have one, get your audio, and then link it to your account. There's not much to it. If you do want to see a more in-depth video about adding fancy overlays and that kind of thing, let me know in the comments and I'll see what I can do. So once you've downloaded OBS, you need to open up the file and you'll be greeted with something that looks a little like this. It's pretty basic, there's nothing on there, so we need to start adding some stuff. This screen up here on the top that we're looking at, this black box, this is kind of a preview. So as we build our various scenes that we want to use while we're streaming, you'll start to see items populate on here. On the bottom left, we have an area that is called scenes. So your scenes will be separated by what you want to show on your screen. So for example, you might want a scene for when you're just chatting. You may have seen other people doing that. You may also want a different scene for when you're actually in game. Something else you might want is kind of like end screens, be right back screens, intermission screens, whatever you like. You can go a bit nuts with it. I think I have about 20 different scenes that I use for different scenarios, so you can really go to town on it if you want to. So what we need to do is to go ahead and choose which scene we want to work on. The first one we'll do is the game screen. So that's going to be probably the one that's on the most if you are streaming. Well, if you're streaming a game, that is. If you're not, then we'll cover that in a little bit. But what we need to do is click the little plus at the bottom in the scenes area. On doing that, it's going to ask us what scene do we want to add, give it a name. So in this case, we'll call it game and choose OK. So you can see here, this has given us a new scene that is called game, but the preview area is still blank, so we need to change that. To do that, we need to start adding sources to our scene. So sources are things like your webcam, your audio input and output, so your mic and your game sound, and your camera, of course. So just like how we added the scene, we're going to add a source in exactly the same way, just by clicking the little plus at the bottom. That's going to open a menu with a ton of stuff in there. Don't worry about it. I think they're all pretty self-explanatory. When we're adding in these different sources, you kind of need to think about it as like a layering system. At the bottom, you're probably going to have the game. On top of that, you might have an overlay, potentially, that you may have either made yourself or downloaded from somewhere. Then on top of that, you might have your camera so that we can see you as well. So you can kind of swap and change them around until you get the look that you're after. With that in mind, the first thing that I'm going to look to add is a game capture. So there's a couple of different ways that you can add your game capture in. It depends on how you're playing and what system you're using. So one of the options would to be actually choose game capture. Now that will look for the game or a game that you currently have playing, so make sure that you have your game loaded up when you try and do this. And that's probably the best one to use if your system is maybe going to struggle with streaming and playing a game at the same time, as it uses a lot less sort of information and data to put that information together. Something else that you could do is capture your full display. So if you have a separate monitor which you play your game on, you could just choose to capture everything that happens over on that display. I don't have that option because I play on an ultra wide, so what I prefer to do is actually use Windows mode. Now what that will do is allow me to choose from all of my available windows that I have open which one I want to show. So when I'm playing games, I make sure that I choose the Windows mode so that I'm able to then capture them using this method. It is a little bit more intensive on your PC, but that's what tends to work for me. So I'm going to go and choose Windows Capture. When we do that, it will ask you to give it a name. So when you first come in here, there's not going to be anything in here. It's going to be completely blank, so you will need to create a new item there. So let's just call this Destiny because that's what I'll be playing. Now when it first opens up, you need to choose from this selection here from all of your available windows. So you can see here I have Destiny showing up because that is running in the background, and I can just go and choose that one. You don't need to worry too much about these other options, but if you do want to just make sure that it's only going to ever capture exactly the game that you're looking for, you could change it to Windows Title Must Match, which is what I usually do. You can also choose whether you want to show your cursor within the game. If you don't want to show it, I normally don't, you can untick Capture Cursor and then choose OK. So we can see on our preview screen, we now have the game showing. Now, at the moment, we've just captured an image. We haven't captured any sound. So we do need to go and add an audio capture into this. So we want to capture our system game audio. So the next thing that we need to do is add in that audio. So what we're going to choose to do that is audio output capture. So that is exactly as it sounds, capturing any audio that is output from, say, your computer or game or whatever. So we need to name it. So in this case, I will call it desktop audio, and we can click OK. Now you get a little drop down and it's going to show you all of your audio devices that are available. You can see I have lots and lots, but you will just need to choose your output that you hear from. So in my case, it could even be my headphones. Let's just say the example is I'm wearing my headphones, and in that I currently hear my game audio, I hear my music, I hear my Discord, my friends chatting. If you want all of that to be on one, then you could actually just choose the headphones, as that's what you would hear. If you have something in here, say called speakers, that's what you would choose, but choose your main audio device. So in my case, I'm going to choose the headphones as that's where I hear everything playing back when I'm streaming. And we can just choose OK. So now we can see that we've added desktop audio, that we also get an audio level in here. Now, as a bit of a tip, you kind of want your background audio to be kind of in the range of maybe between 30 and 20. You want to keep it at the top end of the green scale. When we look at adding in our other audio sources, you'll kind of want to just test them on a test stream and just listen and make sure that they're all balanced correctly. There's nothing worse than not being able to hear you speak because your game audio is really, really loud. It takes a bit of tweaking, but once you get the hang of it, it's super easy. So while we're adding audio, let's also add this thing. So we also want to be able to capture us speaking. That's really, really important. So same again, we just click on the little plus. This time we're going to choose audio input capture. So you'll see down here in the bottom, I actually have a few existing items already that I can choose from. So once you start building in all your different sources, you can then quickly pick and choose which ones you want to use when you're making new scenes. So it becomes much quicker once you've got your basics set up. But for the purpose of today's tutorial, I'm just going to go ahead and create a new one, and we will call it mic and hit OK. Now the next thing it's going to ask is which device. So we just need to pick our microphone from here. Mine is the Rode mic, and choose OK. So now we can see on the audio mixer, we now have two lines, and you can see the green bar bobbing up and down and just pushing nicely into the yellow. So for mic audio, this is the kind of range that you want to be aiming for. You want your peak to be pretty much no more than the -10. That is what's going to be the nicest level for people that are listening. If it's down here, it's going to be too quiet. And if it's in the red, you're going to get audio clipping, and that's just going to sound horrible. If you are in the red, just grab the little slider and pull it down so that you aren't anymore. If you do find that your audio is really quiet, you can add boosts onto your microphone. What I would suggest you do is that you check your system settings for your microphone first and make sure that's turned all the way up. I'm not going to cover doing that in today's tutorial though, so again, any requests, let me know if you want to go into more detail on that one. So if you've watched any of my other videos, you'll already know my feelings on having a webcam visible on the stream. For me, it's really important that your viewers can see you. When I go on to watch somebody streaming, I want to see them. I want to interact with them. I'm often not actually bothered about what game they're playing. If you don't have a webcam and you have a smartphone, I made a video explaining how you can use your smartphone as a webcam for free. So if you have a smartphone and no webcam, check that one out and get your face on your stream. But fortunately, I do have a camera, so we're going to go and add that into our sources. So I'm hitting the plus again, and this time we want to choose video capture device. And within here, it's going to ask us again to create a new one because you won't have made any yet. Let's call this one cam. Okay, so from here you'll just need to pick your webcam from the devices. So you can see in this list I have lots of different ones, but for today we will use the IV cam. So I currently use this as a second camera. Just keep in mind that you can have multiple cameras on your stream if you want to. So within here you can twiddle with some of these options if you want. This looks fine to me. I'm quite happy with how it is. Could go and flip it if you wanted to, but maybe not bother. So once that's come through, we can just choose OK. And you can see what's happened now is it's filled the entire screen, and that's not quite what we want. What we typically want is kind of a smaller camera on the screen. You can grab the little square in the top and shrink that down by holding your left mouse button to the size that you want that to appear as and position it wherever it needs to go. You've got a few options within here as well. If we actually come down to the sources and right click, within here we can say use the transform option. So if we want to maybe flip that around so it faces the other way, we can go and do that. I tend to prefer whichever way I'm looking to look like I'm at least looking towards the game. I feel that looks a little bit more natural. If you are using a free software for your camera like this, just be aware that the wording will also be backwards if you do that. But if we just wanted to kind of crop that out a little bit, a quick shortcut is to hold the Alt key and then you can grab one of the little squares at the end and you could just take that out. If you wanted to do it from the other side, so if we pop that back up and pull it in from that way, we could maybe do that instead. That's probably a little bit better actually, so you're not cutting my face off completely. This isn't the greatest angle to be honest, but it is my second camera, so that's what we're using for the demonstration. So now we have pretty much everything that you need for the basics to get yourself to start streaming. There's obviously a lot more that you can do here. So if you have an overlay, for example, you could add that in as well. So I'm not going to cover using overlays today. We'll leave that for another time. So what we're going to do now is create a second scene. And this time we're going to make it for like an intermission or a just chatting screen. To do that, we can just choose add scenes again. We'll call it chatting and put OK. And you can see what it's done now. It's given us our blank sources again. So as before, we need to go ahead and add new items in there. Something that's a bit of a quick trick is that if you already have a scene set up and you want all of them sources back into this particular new scene that you've created, you can come in here, select them all, right click, copy, go back over to chatting and paste them in here. So that has quickly duplicated what we had set up previously. Now that would be ideal if you didn't want to grab everything, you just wanted to grab maybe the camera and the mic, for example, to pull over. If you wanted to fully duplicate the whole thing, you can actually just right click here and choose duplicate. And that will effectively do the same thing, but it doesn't give you the option to pick and choose the items that you want out of there. Okay, so in this scene, what I want to do is, because it's more of a just chatting, the focus isn't so much the game now, it's going to be more on the camera. So I'm going to switch over the camera and the game in size and in location. What I can do first of all is I can grab my Destiny and I can shrink that down, maybe about that big. I can then click on my camera and I can take that back up to full screen. Now you can see here, because I've been doing some clipping, I need to kind of go outside of that bounding box, which is fine. But now that I've done that, what has happened is it's hidden the game. And the reason for that is, remember these layers. So the camera is on top. So what we need to do to fix that is click on Destiny and hold it, so bring the game back up and drop it on top of the camera, and that will place it up on here. So it's really important that when you're putting these together, think about those layers and where you want things to appear. So when you have more than one scene, the next thing you might want to do is think about how do you transition between the two whilst you're live on stream. So to do that, you can just click over on the scenes and you can see by default it kind of just switches, but there are some options within OBS to make this a little bit more interesting. You come over here to scene transitions, you'll see by default it is set to fade, and the duration of that fade is 300 milliseconds. That's not much time at all. So in here you can choose cut or fade if you just want to go and cut to, but you might want to elongate the fade a little bit to, in fact, let me put it right up just so you can see what that does. See how much slower that transition was? Now, there are other things that you can do when you want to build in different transitions. Again, I'm not covering that today, but you can get really, really creative with making even your own transitions that are super fancy. But just to get started, the fade is probably going to be okay for you. I wouldn't leave this too long. I would keep it nice and short, as you just want to quickly be able to move between one and the other. So then, now that we're all set up, we've got our 2 game scenes and we're ready to go. So how do we actually get this onto our stream? So the next thing that we need to do is come up to File all the way at the top, come into Settings, and there's a few bits in here that you just need to set up. We can ignore the general section for now. The only bit in here that you may want to turn on is to automatically record your streams. If you do that, it can take up quite a lot of space on your hard drive, so beware. I personally use that tool because I like to grab all of my VODs and make compilation videos rather than having to go and download them from, say, Twitch afterwards. But the first thing we need to do is go into the stream settings. From here, just choose which streaming service you're using, whether that's YouTube gaming, Facebook Live, etc. In my case, it's Twitch. Choose which server. I would probably leave this on auto recommended. You could go and change it, but if you do, don't change it to somewhere on the other side of the world. That's not going to work out well for anybody. The next section, if you have a stream key, you'll be able to find this from within your streaming software, or you can just choose connect account, and that's how I do it, so maybe you should too. But when you click connect account, it will just ask you to log in, and if you have authentication set up on there, you'll need to complete that as well. So we're now connected. The next thing that we need to do is check our output. It's really important that you check the video bitrate. Make sure that it isn't anything over 6,000 kilobytes per second, as typically the cap for someone who isn't a partner, certainly on Twitch, is 6,000. So I bring it just below that at 5,500. The sweet spot for me has been somewhere between 4,000 and 5,500. Have a play around with it and see how you get on. If you find that it's really choppy, then you might need to lower your video bitrate to help, so you're sending less information through per second. The next section we need to look at is your audio. You can leave all of these as disabled, but what this will do is if you set any of these items to enabled or pick a specific item for, say, your desktop audio, exactly like I have done for my mic audio, it means that every scene that you create will by default have those audio devices. I like to have the flexibility where I can pick and choose what audio I have on all my different scenes. Sometimes I don't have my mic, and sometimes I will have Discord on there. Sometimes I will have Spotify, other times I won't. So I want the flexibility to pick and choose there. But if all of yours are going to have the same sources, then you could set them up here, and then you wouldn't have to add them in every single time that you create a new scene. On the video screen, you just need to make sure that you have your base canvas set to the level at which you want to stream. 720p is actually probably fine for most people. I have mine to 1080, but what it will do currently at the level for me is it's going to scale me down to 720 anyway, so you might want to set that. Again, if you're having any issues with buffering or lag or dropped frame rates, you might want to drop this down if you've got it higher. Don't bother with 4K unless you're a partner, then go for it. You'll also want to set your frames per second, so really that should be either 30 or 60 frames per second. If you're using a fancy camera, make sure the settings on your camera are also going to match the frame rate of which you're streaming to avoid any problems. 30 frames per second, in all honesty, is absolutely fine. If you'd like to set some hotkeys, you can do so in the Hotkeys tab. So hotkeys could be things like enabling you to transition between your game scene and your chatting scene. So to do that, you can go down to the relevant scene and choose a hotkey to enable you to switch to that scene. And you can see here the same for the game one. You might also want to set a hotkey for streaming, so you could toggle streaming on, streaming off. I tend to just manage that from with OBS without a hotkey, just in case I push it by accident when I'm having a keyboard rage. And that is all that we need to look at in here. Don't worry about the advanced section just now. Just click apply and OK. So that's pretty much everything that you need to set up to get yourself going with using OBS Studio. Hopefully it didn't seem too daunting. All you need to do when you're ready to start streaming is hit the big green button and you're off. Do remember, once you're done streaming, come back into OBS and choose the red stop streaming button. Now, this video was aimed at people who are maybe just starting out looking into streaming and aren't sure which software to use to make that happen, or somebody who is maybe switching from something like the Twitch studios, or maybe someone who is already using another software and is wanting to make the switch to OBS Studio to take advantage of all of the plugins that are available for it. So we've kept it really simple, really basic, the absolute minimum that you need to get yourself on there. You can build up your stream over time, adding overlays and add-ons and making it fun and adding your own personality. If you would like to see a video on a more advanced OBS tutorial where I can show you how we go about doing those kind of things, as well as maybe advanced audio settings on how to get really nice crispy audio, do let me know down in the comments and I'll see what I can do. So that is it today. I hope you found this video useful. As always, if you'd like to come chat with me some more, maybe hang out and play some games, I stream over on Twitch every Wednesday, Friday and Sunday. It'd be really great to see you there. I also have a Discord if you would like to join that. Come and join in the chat. We talk about all kinds of things, stuff like this, gaming, camera nerdy stuff. It's just a nice place to come hang out. So I will put the links for all of these things down in the description. I'll also make sure that all of the links for downloading OBS and everything that you've seen today are all available in the description too. So all that's left to say is thanks for watching and I'll see you in the next one. It's happening here! It's like the boys are just like, mine's bigger than yours, look at it. Wow. I mean, can we intervene? How do we fix this? How do we break these guys up from dry humping each other by the tree? Lads! Stop it! I don't know what to do. How do I fix it?